Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Retro Bliss, and you are on the Retro Bliss Rewind podcast. Welcome to everybody watching. If you're watching from Mike's Gaming Gala, we are simulcasting over there. We have a good show tonight. A very fun show is in store for tonight. A number of weeks ago, we had an episode where we did top 10 Atari favorites of all time, and that was one of my favorite shows. And so I have to say this. Casey, the Intellivision gamer, said, well, why don't you do a top 5? And he couldn't be on, but I think we got a great guest tonight anyway. And so, but without further delay, let's just bring him on. First of all, let's bring Mike in from Mike's Gaming Gala.
Hello.
Brian from BD Retro Mods. And the himself, Dr. Scott from Game Closet.
Crap, not this guy again.
Fresh sarcasm served daily.
Yeah, he is not a stranger to the Retro Bliss Rewind podcast by any means. As a matter of fact, during my live streams, if you look at my end credits, he's in there as a regular panelist from time to time. So anyway, it's going to be a fun show tonight. Now, we did not share our list with each other.
It's all a surprise.
It's going to be a surprise. There are going to be reasons why we have consoles on our list, and the other guy may have them on his list for a totally different reason, and that's okay. We're just going to have fun with it tonight. We're going to talk about it, kind of reminisce if it's a nostalgia thing. If not, we can talk about the games that are on the console.
And also, like, we didn't set any restrictions of why something could be on your list. This isn't necessarily the best list. It's our favorites, or it could be you think this system is the most capable, or like anything. The one thing that we did kind of hedge a little bit is you can't say, oh, the Wii is my favorite console because it can emulate everything else and it's easy to hack. I mean, you could if you really wanted to, but we wanted to steer away from that. So we're just talking about the stock consoles.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I think we should just go ahead and start. I think we should start with you, Mike, like we did last time. Work our way around clockwise until we get to the end and to our number one favorite console. So
my number 5 favorite console is going to shock everybody in the chat, maybe even the people here. But my number 5 is the Intellivision. Based on the amount of Intellivision that I cover on this channel, you would think it'd be 1 or 2. But I have zero nostalgia for the Intellivision. But it might be maybe tied with the 2600, but it might be my favorite homebrew community. I had an Intellivision for years before I discovered the homebrew scene. And then when I actually started getting to the homebrew, that's when I fell in love with the Intellivision. And so it's a incredible homebrew scene. Some of the stuff coming out on the Intellivision is just, you never would have guessed that those kind of games were even possible on a second gen system. But yeah, that is my number 5.
Well, you know, the Intellivision is a great console. It really is.
It is.
And even at number 5, there are so many different consoles out there. Even making a top 5 on someone's list is a good thing for the Intellivision, because it is a great console. I mean, I'm not hating you for picking it number 5. That's pretty high if you consider how many consoles are out there.
All things considered, yeah. And there are certainly, like, my list is, like, after this one is mostly nostalgia. But like I said, if I had nostalgia, if I had an Intellivision when I was a kid, I imagine it probably would have been a bit higher.
You know what my nostalgia for the Intellivision is? Seeing George Plimpton on TV.
Yes.
That was it. I didn't have friends that had one. I didn't even, I remember seeing the controls and going, I didn't even play a game with no stick.
And
Right.
and when I
Yeah.
say Intellivision, Poe, I mean every model of Intellivision. They all play the same games. No, Intellivision Model 2 will not be my number one.
All right. That's a good. I think that's a good start. That's a good start. All right, Brian, you're up.
Well, hopefully my internet stays good because I know I'm seeing some choppiness here, and I think it's on my
Little
end.
bit,
So,
yeah.
for me, my number 5 was the Atari 2600. And again, when I set up my top 5, I kind of base it on like different criteria. One, what impact did it make, on the industry, which obviously Atari made a very big impact on it. And I know, shocker, right? And just the other things I looked at is just what do I like to go back to and enjoy, and and what nostalgia did I have with it. And even though Intellivision 2 was my very first console I experienced, playing the Atari at my aunt's and just all the just the variety of different games that were available for it was so much fun to play. And and again, Atari kind of set that initial standard for video gaming, in the home. So that's
Good
my
I am genuinely shocked that it is not higher on your list, the 2600.
yeah.
Based on the amount of 2600 in Atari that we talk about.
No, oh yeah, and again, I make a ton of controllers and accessories for Atari. It's just
I imagine
again,
that's your best-selling console for accessories.
no, it is. It definitely is. And again, it's very good. But as we go through, I think there's just some other things obviously that edged it. So
Oh, there you go, Brian. Jeremiah Thomas has a new target.
now again, this is consoles of all time. So, again, I think being at number 5 is still really, really good. And I'll do spoiler alert because again, in many shows you'll hear me talk about how much I love the Master System and the 7800. Those did not make it here in the top 5 for me tonight. And again, it's just because there's other
I thought
things.
for sure Master System would be on your list too.
Wow. I struggled, and like I said, when I get to number 4, I'll get into that. But no, I like I said, 2600. I feel good with it at number 5 because obviously it was the beginning. A lot of fun stuff to still play today. A lot of it doesn't hold up, but there's still some very good games that do hold up. Like
Well,
we did
and you
when
know
we
what?
talked about.
Here we accept everybody, no matter how wrong they are. It's okay.
That is true because his number 3 is the R Zone, and we love you anyway.
Hey, who is Art Freak 06?
That's
I
my
wonder.
wife. Yeah.
Tell Harley to I think she made some pretzels or something.
Yeah, she did.
She better save one for Uncle Phil, okay?
They're
I
so
saw
good.
that. That's
so
awesome.
Good.
Hey, Harley, what's up? Lynn, how you guys doing? All right.
There you go. You know what? This is why Brian put the 2600 like because the Retron 77
there
is
you
number
go.
one.
Yeah, I promise you, there is no Hyperkin products that are in my top 5.
The Retron GX. Yeah.
I mean, my number 2 is the Hyperscan.
Yeah.
Get the cards out.
Oh, here we're reliving Discord all over again.
Yes, I did. I made a whole list. I was like Hyperscan, Game Wave, Hyperscan again, that little mobile keychain thing that Poe just reviewed.
Engage.
All right, Scott, you are up.
My lists were partly nostalgic and partly library based. But yeah, they kind of go every other in a way. So I had a hard time coming up with what I have a list here that there were some things I'm like, no, not this. So there I am taking a bunch of Xanax and things like that, trying to calm down. Don't have Xanax.
I play better that way.
Yeah, but anyway, my number 5 is actually the PlayStation 2. And a good deal of the reason is because of its library. It's a massive library, like Tekken Tag Tournament, Super Bust a Move, and of course, there's a lot of non-exclusives and stuff on there, like Spy Hunter, but exclusives like Spider-Man 1, 2, 3, SOCOM 1, 2, and 3. But of course, it is mostly backward compatible depending upon the model you have. The fat ones, of course, the originals play all the PS1 library, and of course,
that's legit because that's out of the box. That's not
Yep.
a mod.
And the great DualShock 2 controller. I love that controller. Absolutely love that controller. But yeah, that is my number 5, and I will say this. There's another console that I was wrestling back and forth for my number 5, and I will tell you what that is in a little while.
An honorable
No, I
mention.
mean PlayStation 2 is a very good pick, and you know, and I struggled. Like I wanted to fit the PS2 somewhere in here, and I couldn't do it, and it was just, and it's not because I don't like the PS2, because around that time I loved JRPGs.
It was a console to have for a bit.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, and knowing with the PS1 how, like, you know, when Nintendo made the mistake and stuck with cartridge, you know, so you had all the third-party developers swarm Sony for the CD format, and or not, or whatever format they used, but with that,
CD.
it was CD. I for some reason I thought it was like, I was thinking Dreamcast. Dreamcast used a special format, but
GD-ROM.
yeah, but I mean, again, all the JRPGs that we got during the PlayStation and PlayStation 2 era, I mean, it was huge. I mean, we never saw anything of that level of those type of games being released until that period of time, and it really gave a good name to Sony, and plus their first party lineups were spectacular during
absolutely.
that time.
Yeah, MotorStorm, Gran Turismo 3 and 4, Champions of Norath. I mean, you know, Katamari Damacy.
Oh yeah.
I think Splashdown Ride's Gone Wild. That's a big fave of mine. But I also had a lot of nostalgia for it as well. Not as maybe much nostalgia as a couple others on my list, but my sons, when they were younger, that was one of the consoles I had, and that we used to play a lot of when because I am divorced, so when I had them, sometimes it'd be like, hey, let's play this. And my elder son Cameron, he and I, it took us about every other weekend for about 3 years to finish Champions of Norath. So yeah, it's like, all right, but we didn't play it every single weekend, so that's why it took so long. So yeah, a lot of nostalgia there.
All right.
Well, and with that, I mean, the PlayStation 2 was still the top selling console,
the number one selling console of all time. Yeah.
Now again, there's another console getting close to it, but
Sony found more numbers. They found more numbers, so they still have. They did. They're like, oh no, what about this? So yeah, they kept that under their arm for a while, I think, just in case. So kind of like a cheese sandwich, just keep it under your arm.
Oh, stop.
Keep it warm.
Well, guys, you guys are going to be probably, at least until I get to 2 and 1, are going to be really surprised at my list. But I will say that every console on my list, I have a bit of nostalgia, if not a lot of nostalgia for. So, my very first, or my number 5 console of all time, wait for it, the original Xbox.
Yeah, the original Xbox, really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is one reason right here. Well, this style controller. This
that's not original Xbox controller, though.
I said this style.
No, that's the most recent.
The offset sticks, I will agree, is the best controller configuration of all time.
Yes.
And so I got used to playing that way, and I prefer to play that way when I play modern games. And also because of some of the games, like I got it when my kids were still young. And so I played it with them, and we played some unique titles like this is you can't see. Dang.
It's all green.
It is. Munch's Odyssey.
I
remember that?
Yep.
Yeah. And then Ampeg. This is my shout out to Justin. He loves sports.
You mean Amped?
Amped. I'm sorry, I said Ampeg. I was thinking the bass amp. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Amp's a good one.
Yeah. Tony Hawk series. And then this is one of my favorites is Project Gotham.
Absolutely.
I loved playing this back in the day. And so yeah, Xbox. I just, like I said, you guys might be surprised at my picks and why I picked them, but yeah, I had nostalgia for it because I played it when my kids were young, and I got to share some quality time with them when they were younger on it, and I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it. So yeah,
Xbox is a great console for sure.
Well, again, it was, even though it was Microsoft's first entry, it wasn't a terrible entry. I mean, obviously it had some hiccups, and but I think one of the biggest things though was really, you could make the argument it was really the Dreamcast 2.
Yeah.
So
a lot of people say that.
I mean, at the end of the day, I think
Greatly
Sega had
improved the controller from the
Yes.
Dreamcast.
Yes. I mean, Sega went,
A lot of the Dreamcast, like the Sega exclusives, went to Xbox.
yeah, during that generation. Yeah, they were most were exclusive to the Xbox. Not all of them, but most of them were.
All right, Mike,
All
you're
right,
up. Number
so
4.
My number 4, this may shock some people, maybe not, is the PlayStation 1. So I was a Nintendo kid. So we had Atari until I was about 8-9 years old. Then we got an NES. Then we got a Super Nintendo. Then we got a Nintendo 64 because I have 5 younger brothers, and it was 4-player multiplayer. And we had, a lot of people trash the Nintendo 64. We had tons of fun with it. It doesn't hold up now, but we had tons and tons of fun with it. No cannabis. No. You're going to lose your mod rights pretty soon. No. Yeah, Jet Set Radio for the original Xbox. But so we had that, and it wasn't until later, probably about 97, I think, whatever year Metal Gear and Final Fantasy VII came out. My brother wanted Final Fantasy VII. I kind of wanted that too, but what I really wanted was Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah.
Neither of us were disappointed. I never played. I had zero interest in the PlayStation when it had its original dog bone controller without the thumbsticks. And then obviously the Nintendo 64 comes out. Oh, analog sticks is how we need to do 3D. And really, Sony refined it by adding that second thumbstick. And that was the way to play 3D games. Metal Gear Solid was incredible. Final Fantasy VII, not my favorite Final Fantasy, but it was certainly a massive evolution of what that was supposed to be. When we played sports games, we played them on like the NHL games on PlayStation. There were a lot of things on the original PlayStation that they really thought outside of the box. Like there were a lot of weird games on the PlayStation. There were certainly a lot of bad games on the PlayStation as well, but that library was massive. The amount of games in there that you could pick up and play and have a great time. And even, being a teenager at the time, I was like 17, 18, Siphon Filter with a taser. Who didn't love just roasting a guy with a taser and stuff like that? It was more adult. It was targeted that way. But for me, it was the first console. Like Nintendo and Sega really had that. Oh, Sega is the big boy system and Nintendo is the kid system.
Yeah.
But the games were really very similar. Just it's the same Mortal Kombat, just one has gray blood and the other has red blood. PlayStation took it that next level. You had the Resident Evil games. You had and you had them on Nintendo 64, but there was something different about playing them on the PlayStation. And Jeremiah Thomas, your judgments are no longer any concern of mine. Night Driver can be a 0. Your complaints will not.
Metal Gear Solid
will not be valid.
Metal Gear Solid's the reason why I even bought a PlayStation 1. And I solved that game when my eldest was born. I mean, it was just like, there he is in his little bassinet, and I'm sitting there, Metal Gear. Yeah, I did it. And that was like, I think it was the first game I ever solved. I think.
Well, and again, when you think about just the memory, I mean, because it wasn't just the specs, but it was just the fact that the medium was different,
Well,
and the medium was at a point that you could expand on these games so much more than you ever could with a cartridge at the time. And and because of that, you had such a variety, and Sony was willing to take risks. I mean, you had some very unique games that you would have never been like, what the hell is this? Like, especially, seeing Parappa the Rapper the first time, I was like, what is
and
this?
I was never a big fan of that. I know a lot of people have
Jumping Flash, that was another one where it was just like, this is weird.
But you also have to recognize, like, the PlayStation 1 was weaker than the Nintendo 64.
Mm-hmm.
It looked, honestly, just as good, if not better in some cases, but it was the weaker console. But
Glover, it was just better on the PlayStation 1 than it is on the 64, simply because of the control.
Mm-hmm. And so, that's on my list at number 4, because for me, that generation was the first step towards what I would consider really modern gaming. And it changed me as a gamer, if that's to make any sense.
Oh no, I mean, it was definitely a peak point. Now the sad part is, and I think you kind of alluded to it, is just to try to go back and play a lot of those games today.
That generation is so rough to go back.
That generation is so rough. I mean, now if it's a straight 2D game, it's beautiful.
Yep.
But any of those 3D
any
games,
polygons,
it's a mess. But again, at the time, you didn't know any better. Back in 95, I think, when the PlayStation 1 came out, I mean, that was it. I mean, it was like, holy crap, we went from that 16-bit era to that, and it was just so much stuff.
Cool. Brian, number 4. Shock us again.
Yeah. Well, this one might not be as much of a shock, but my number 4 is the Sega Genesis. And the reason for that was, obviously, at that point, I was knee deep into the NES, just like many other kids, during that period of time. And obviously arcades were very, very popular then. And I mean, I remembered throwing so many quarters in the games like Altered Beast, Golden Axe, all these awesome Sega arcade machines.
A little bit of redemption from Jeremiah there for you.
And when you literally had a home console come out in 1989 with almost it wasn't perfect, but almost a near perfect arcade port of Altered Beast.
Yeah.
Followed by all their other hits of near arcade port. And they were able to do near arcade because the Genesis was a stripped down System 16 board. They literally used the architecture from their System 16 arcade machines to make the Sega Genesis. So it made that compatibility easier. Again, it wasn't 100% perfect, but I'll tell you what, when you were only 9 years old, you sure as hell wouldn't tell the difference between playing Altered Beast or Golden Axe on the Sega Genesis and playing it in the arcade. So, I mean, it's great. And then, like you said, kind of talked about the whole, 16-bit war, when the Super Nintendo finally came out. One of the things to give the Genesis credit for is they did take some risks. Some of the games that you had on there, they took risks with, and they were okay. I'm not going to say they were drastic risks, but they were, at the time, they were definitely, like some of the different styles of games. And like when you look at some of the other publishers, like the smaller ones, like, Renovation, all those different types of games that came out in the lifetime of the system. Namco threw a lot of things for the system. Electronic Arts was doing a lot of stuff
Oh,
that you
yeah.
didn't normally see, that you would maybe see on computer, but you didn't see on console until then. And
Yellow Notch.
yeah, that's right. So it's just, at the end of the day, that the Sega Genesis was just the prime. And the thing is like, I struggled with this because I'm like, do I put the Master System there? Because I like the Master System. My thing with the Master System, though, I didn't experience it until much later on. And I think because of that, I have a better appreciation for it. Where if I would have experienced the Master System back when I was knee deep in an NES, I don't know that I would have the same feelings for it. Where the Genesis took everything that was great about the Master System and just made it better on all levels. So,
and even if we're just talking about libraries, the Genesis, especially if you like shooters and fighters, has an awesome lineup.
Yeah. And again, they ported so much of their arcade games that were just great. And then obviously, during some of the genres, they made their own, you can say, clones or whatever, but just like how you got Streets of Rage, and other ones that was 32X is absolutely not my number one.
No, his number one is a Sega CD. We know it.
No, I
Virtual Boy.
Yeah, bad experience with the 32X. Like I that was a poor life choice on my part whenever
you had one originally?
I got one, like I didn't get it day one, but they weren't doing that great, so they lowered the price on them pretty quickly. And it was like during Christmas time where it was like, hey, what do you want? And I'm like, well, I want a 32X because I'm loving my Sega Genesis at that point. And then I end up getting one. I'm just and I play Doom, and I'm like,
in fairness, Mr. Please. In fairness, Mr. Please, there is no way it would ever make my top 5 or even top 10, but I did enjoy my Sega CD, and I still do.
There's some fun stuff on the CD.
Yep.
And with the Sega CD, even though they're absolute garbage today to try to look at, like the first attempt of the live action style games was one of those staples of a time in video game history that we probably never ever want to go back to. So, but again, they tried something new. I mean, because who wanted to play Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch on the Sega CD?
I do now.
I liked Jurassic Park on the Sega CD. It gave you that sense of ominous.
Yeah. Final Fight was good because it made, again, closer to an arcade port, but
Sewer Shark.
Yep, Sewer Shark.
Oh, I played the crap out of Sewer Shark when I had
I'm sure you
CD.
did.
Yeah, because it was the pack. It was the packet. It was the pack-in game. I mean, by the time I got one, so
cool. Dr. Scott, what is your number 4?
My number 4 is based on a huge deal of nostalgia for me, and this system really got punished at the time, and it didn't last very long because of the PlayStation 2. And that's the Sega Dreamcast.
I'm glad somebody had it on their list.
I absolutely love my Sega Dreamcast, and I complained and until I could get mine up and sort of running, because I'm not using discs right now. I've got all my discs in the closet, and I did get a.
Is it a game closet?
Yes, it is. It is a game closet right here inside the. It's a closet in the closet, so, and it has shelves. There's a top shelf for the good stuff too. I absolutely love my Dreamcast. The VMU was very innovative, although not necessarily a big deal now. It's still cool with the little D-pad on it and everything. And you can even play little games on it.
It's like a Tamagotchi it's like a Tamagotchi and a memory card had a baby.
Yep.
Right. And then it was the very first built-in modem for online play. I actually played a couple of games online. Don't remember what they were for any reason. I think Alien Front Online was the only one I can remember offhand that I played. But Choo Choo Rocket, Crazy Taxi 1 and 2, Cannon Spike, Mr. Driller, Ms. Pac-Man, Maze Madness was the best on that system with 128-bit. Soul Calibur and Toy Commander were the 2 reasons why I even bought the console. Mars Matrix, Bust a Move 4, and of course, my favorite on the console. And if you go back and watch my my video on the 25th anniversary of the console, you'll see Sega Marine Fishing and why I love it so much. Absolutely wonderful system. And to me, that I think I'm more warm and fuzzy about that particular console than any other on my list. So that's it.
Well, and you
so
know
I'm
what?
with Thumper Squid here. Hydro Thunder was awesome.
Hydro Thunder.
One of the things I really loved about the Dreamcast, I never had one, but friends in college had them, and I played them sometimes. I loved that it was the first time for me that I really felt like I was taking the arcade home.
Yes.
Because the type of games that I liked in the 16-bit era were not the arcade ports. Like, I was never into the Street Fighter. I mean, maybe a little bit. I was never into Mortal Kombat. I was never into Altered Beast even. I liked the platformers. I liked the shooters that didn't come from the arcades. But Crazy Taxi, games like Hydro Thunder, like, it felt like you were playing the arcade. And it looked, at least in my eyes then, looked like you were playing the arcade.
And,
well, and you know, I mean, probably gonna jump, but I might as well throw it out there. The Dreamcast was my number 3, and again, for the same reasons.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. So I mean, instead of us talking about the Dreamcast again, might as well throw it out now.
As well.
It's just so yeah, I mean, with the Dreamcast, like, I got that day one, and you know, talk about an ad campaign too on 99 and 99. You know, I mean, and there's so many games that was released for it too, because again, Sega had such a great run with the Genesis. They stayed strong with the Sega CD. 32X was an absolute flop. People started to lose faith. Sega Saturn was, at least in America, a flop, and for the same reason, because it's like, I just spent how much money on a 32X, and now you just literally surprised us with a brand new console. And again, they struggled to get a lot of third-party support that you know, that compared to what they had during the 16-bit era. And like, the Dreamcast was like the redemption, where, to Mike's point,
which unfortunately was too late.
Unfortunately too late. And you know, they got that third-party support again, and they had so many good arcade ports, because again, like, where the Sega Genesis was based on the System 16 board, you had the Sega Dreamcast that was based on the Naomi board. So it was so much easier for them to port those arcade games, and for them to be nearly, if not arcade perfect. So, you know, I mean, the launch was insane. Like, I remember having, I think, 8 games pre-ordered for the Dreamcast on day one. I mean, because I wanted Soul Calibur, and I wanted Hydro Thunder. I wanted all the games like that were being released at that time. And they were all really good. And it's a shame, because I do feel that it didn't get the credit it deserved, because I will say that was probably one of the golden ages of Sega, in the sense of, I think they knew at that point, we're the underdogs. So who cares? Let's just try the most craziest stuff, and
Jet Set Radio,
and let's just have fun. So let's do Jet Set Radio. Let's do Space Channel 5. Let's do the what was it? Seaman? Is it Seaman?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
and let's get Leonard Nimoy to voice it.
Right. I mean,
they were doing then with the Dreamcast what Nintendo has been doing ever since I'd say the GameCube, but moreover the Wii, the Wii U, and the
try to be different.
They were trying to be different, but Sega didn't stick with it. They said, "Okay, we're done," and that was it. And they walked out, and they stuck with that different sort of mentality. They not only would they still be around console wise today. I've even said, I forget who I was talking to recently, but I said, if they were to jump back in right now, as all these people are jumping out, and not to get too far off subject, all these people are jumping out with physical games. If they were to go, oh no, Evercade, we see what you're doing. We're going to come out with Dreamcast 2. They call it the Dreamcast 2 and go, we are keeping with physical media. Everybody else would be like, all right, see you Microsoft, see you Sony, bye. And that'd be it. And
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this last week. You can
Yeah.
live in
Mhm.
your dream world. It's never going to happen.
No, it's never gonna happen.
I mean, we would all love
and
to see a new
and
Sega
Mr.
system, but
Postile
it's
must
not
no longer
happening.
be in the chat because I don't see a semen joke yet.
No, there's no
Yeah,
semen.
Yeah.
thank you for that.
But so yeah, I mean it was, and I mean one other one I spent so many hours on was Fantasy Star Online on the system. It was
Yeah.
such a, again, it does not age well, but at the
No.
time it was so good, and I even eventually then paid for the broadband adapter when which I wish I would have kept that, but
But you can buy an
Raspberry
aftermarket
Pi.
one now.
Yeah,
So,
you can do like a Raspberry Pi type setup to,
Yeah.
because I guess there's still like some homebrew type servers there to where if you still want to play some of these online games, you can. Now, I don't think there's a huge crowd or anything, but
I
it
watched a
is
friend
still
of mine
there.
play a lot of Fantasy Star Online. It was not my kind of game, but any RPG
Mhm.
like that, I will watch. I can't play
Yeah.
because I just can't do it.
Yeah, and just like what Chris said, like again, they were so like I think they were at a point where we're like, we don't care, let's just throw stuff out and see what sticks, and they had zero, like no craps to give for risk. It was just because again, like who would have ever thought we'd have Typing of the Dead
Yeah.
on the Sega Dreamcast?
And it's got a great homebrew community now. And if you've never played Sturmwind, play Sturmwind. What a great shooter.
I see you, Poe. I'm not putting it up, but I see you, Poe.
Oh, yeah. Rob said he uses Flycast. Yep.
Yes.
All right.
All right.
My turn,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, your turn for number
Go.
4.
We're at 36 minutes.
Yeah, well, but he already did his number 3, so we're skipping him.
That helps.
Yep.
This one I had the least nostalgia for, but I have it nonetheless. I've had it probably less than 10 years. I'm almost sure of it. But I have friends over quite a bit, and we play on this console all the time, and that is the Nintendo Wii. The Wii, the reason why
it gets a lot of flack. I agree with you. It's not on my list, but I agree with you. I liked the Wii a lot.
Graphically, some of the stuff, but man, it's about playability and having fun, and that's what I get when I play on my Nintendo Wii. Wii Sports, Mario Kart, just a bunch of different games, and I love it. We once we start playing on the Wii for the Nintendo, when we have friends over, my wife gets mad at me because we have to kick them out. Like it's 1:00 in the morning. It's like I got to be at work. I have to be at work at 6:30. So yeah, I had the least nostalgia for it, but I do have nostalgia nonetheless because ever since I've had it, it has brought me much joy. We've had a lot of fun with the Nintendo Wii, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
So I remember I threw my brother's bachelor party, and I got House of the Dead 1 and 2 for the Wii.
Yes.
And I got the little plastic gun thing. And you're playing as if you were in the arcade on the Wii. It brought shooting games back like that. And in my personal opinion, Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 are among the best platformers, not only just in the Mario sphere, but of all time. They are fantastic.
Absolutely.
The library for the Wii in general is pretty large.
It's very large. There is a lot of shovelware. There's a lot of little party game stuff. But at the same time, sometimes when you just have a few buddies over, you want to play some party games. We played the crap out of all of those Rayman Raving Rabbids party games.
Those were good.
Right?
I still own all those for the system. So, I mean, they're great.
Yeah.
And I think a few more months on my my fitness board, I'll be right where I want to be.
Well, obviously, you don't play much.
None
of us do, Phil. None of us do.
You're lucky I'm not kicking you off, only because I know you can put yourself back on.
Yeah. Well, no, and I do agree with Richard Rob. I mean, there was so much shovelware for that because you got to remember, like,
there is.
it's one of those things where, as silly as it sounds, I mean, people literally bought that just to be a Wii bowling machine. Like, you had so many families that probably never bought any
So
other
much
game for
fun.
it. I mean, because they wanted to have that at home to play, because the
Yep.
uniqueness of the controller worked for what they wanted it to do. But again, there was so
There was a
much.
lot.
There was a ton of trash for that system, and also, I think Rob said it too, is this, they so forced the whole
Yeah.
Wii controls. And like, one game I'll remember, it just ticked me off the no end, was Zelda Skyward Sword. Like I was so excited for that game, and then I
It
bring it
looks
home.
so good too.
It looks so good, and the minute they're like, you got to swipe at this specific angle to take out this boss or this mob, and it's like, it's not even registering correctly. I mean, I literally got so mad at it, I just
So
said hell with it.
Retro Rob exemplifies what I was saying. I think a lot of people poo-poo the Wii, and maybe not unjustly so, because there was like literally 85% of the library was shovelware. But the first party Nintendo games, maybe not Skyward Sword. Okay, Skyward Sword made you upset, but they like it never, especially once you kind of like, that was the system that you played. It felt natural with the Wii and the nunchuck, just and you're playing your game. The new Super Mario Brothers games, oh man, like 2D Mario back at peak.
Yeah, just turn a controller and go to town.
I know, there's no doubt that's most,
and that's what
Nintendo
Jason's saying right here.
Yeah.
Like, out of 1,000 games, 70% are shovelware. That's still 300 decent games.
Right.
Yeah. Right. One of the best games that I played on there, and I featured it in a couple of videos, is Mad World. It is an
yes,
yeah,
and it's very adult.
And yeah, it's very adult, and that's one of the games that have the motion controls that they actually really make sense. Yep. And I also don't feel like I'm jogging downtown when I'm using them too. And then another really good first-person shooter, actually two of them, is the Conduit 1 and 2. So, there are some really great games for the Wii if you can throw all the junk away. So if we can just put in all the bad games in the landfill with all the ETs and stuff, we'd be good. Yeah. Because there's some great stuff on the Wii. So good pick, Phil. Absolutely great pick.
I have fun with it. So that's why I picked it. I have fun.
That's why I love my Wii U, because I can play all those games too.
And that's the other thing. The Wii U, I mean, the Wii U is a story of such lost potential. Like, you play Nintendo Land. It's not on my list, but we can just kind of briefly. You play Nintendo Land, and just having one player with a different perspective of everything. Yeah, it's great. Retro Rob, what's he say here? Nintendo has a loyalty to a fault. It's literally the same titles over and over again. My kids will be playing Mario Kart 30, Metroid Retirement Home, and Mario Bros. Kids. But here's the thing, and here's the reason.
But they're all good.
They've never released a bad Mario Kart. They're all great.
Yeah.
They've, like, the Metroid games are great. The Mario Brother games are great. If they weren't great, people wouldn't play them. And they do have a very smart marketing method, in that they are games that are very accessible to young kids, and they grow up loving Nintendo.
Yeah.
So there is a built-in loyalty there. But my number 3 system is not a Nintendo system. It is, like Phil, it's the original Xbox. So the PlayStation 2 was like this revelation of, oh, this is what modern gaming can be. Sorry, the PlayStation 1 was this revelation. The PlayStation 2 was a better looking version of that. It has a fantastic library, like an amazing library. The controller isn't updated much. It's a DualShock controller. And then Xbox comes out with the offset sticks and just a beast of power. Like, it was like you were playing a game, and it had a different feel on the Xbox. It was the last console I was ever given as a gift. It was I was in college when it came out, and my parents got it for me for Christmas. This was like a year or two after the Xbox had come out. I think I was still in college. Maybe I was just out of college. But either way, just the game. I loved the flat out games. Those were hilarious. Playing the Burnout game, like a lot of great racing games. And what made great racing games specifically really good is those analog triggers that you could
Absolutely.
use as your gas pedal. Just was a huge difference maker. And
and even
playing
Fusion
like
Frenzy was a fun party game.
yeah,
it was because it wasn't like the, I don't want to say kiddie, because Mario Party is a lot of fun. I still love playing Mario parties, but just Fusion Frenzy at the time just gave a different feel for what a party game could be, and it was fun.
I was gonna mention this one, Morrowind. Played the crap out of Morrowind. Max Payne. Just
Max
that era
Payne.
of gaming was really good. I got a funny story about Max Payne. I was dating my ex-wife at the time, and I was playing through Max Payne, and it was doing the autosaves. And she came over, and I had like a basement apartment at the time. She came over, and I was like, "Oh, you got to check out this game," because she played games too. And she started playing Max Payne, and it autosaved. I was like so close to the end, and it went over. I never even put it in the console again. I was so brokenhearted.
Oh no.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with Azaric. I think that's how you said it, because I was using like cheat codes, to be able to save anywhere, and literally I fell through the ground and toward the very end of the game, and it glitched out, and my save was completely ruined. And I'm just like, well, I am not going back to this game starting from scratch.
And Retro Rob makes a good point. It's Microsoft did what Microsoft does, and this was
Rip
like
people
the
off?
Dreamcast. The reason people say, well, no, that's Apple's job, Scott.
No, they screw people over, not rip people off.
They rip people off. They rip people off badly. Anyhow, the people call the Xbox the Dreamcast 2s because it did the final piece that, at least the main consoles, Sony and Microsoft consoles, from here on out were computers with custom OS.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, because toward the end of the Dreamcast, we started seeing PC games ported over. Because again, you had a version of Windows built into the Dreamcast that allowed for that, and but again, by that point, it was toast, because we got Quake Arena and some other different ones that really shined, where Xbox took it to that level, like all those games that people loved on the PC. But at that time, PC gaming just was very, very expensive, where it was so much cheaper to have a regular Xbox and be able to play Elder Scrolls, something that was only exclusive to the PC at that point, and play many of these other games that came out that were just exclusive to a PC. And the Xbox was really that first spot of really seeing that mature to what we have now, which is, well, now we're to a point where everything's blended. It don't matter really what you're playing on. So,
and I'm pretty sure this is in reference to me telling me a story about my ex-wife. My common response to that is, if you had any idea how much money I had to spend to not be married to that woman, no. All right.
On that note, so again, I already gave my number 3, which was the Sega Dreamcast. So Scott, on to.
Well, to speed up for time, my number 3, I don't have any nostalgia for because it's a relatively new console, but I love its library, and it's the PlayStation 4. I just recently got a PSVR. I don't play it too much. I got it last summer, and I've goofed around with it. So that's an attachment or accessory or whatever you want to say for that. And that just blew my mind. There's people out there who are playing VR games now, and they're going, "Oh, this is so cool!" And I've been doing this for years. And I'm sitting there going, "Do you know there's stuff behind me? That's so cool!" So people are watching me knock over lamps in my office, and Lynn's filming me doing that. She's just having a good time watching me destroy stuff. But the DualShock 4 controller, absolutely love that controller. And then, of course, other games, not all of them are exclusives, but some of them are like Republic, Spider-Man, Stray. Stray is such a great game. If you can play that on your PS4, PS5, or Xbox Series X or PC, you have to. The Uncharted Collection, Uncharted 4, Untitled Goose Game, what a great one. Wartech Fighters, if you love a Mega Boost on the PS1, you're gonna love Wartech Fighters. Zombie Army Trilogy, which of course was ported from the PCs, Evil West, and Diablo 3, which is on everything. There's so much on the PlayStation 4 that you can play, and of course you can play all those games, every last one of them, on the PS5. But I will say, spoiler alert, there is no PS5 on my list because it's the PS5.
Yeah, and Jason, despite the fact that I know all my picks are retro, we did not limit to retro consoles.
We did not limit to retro.
Honestly,
I actually put it in
Switch...
my title, though. That's probably.
Oh, did you put it in your title? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
in Jason's defense,
that's okay. That's okay.
It is my only non-retro console.
Honestly, the Nintendo Switch, despite the fact that it's a little long in the tooth right now, could be on my top 5 list easily. But I'm thinking retro personally.
And just a quick side note, because I said the reason how come a certain system isn't on here, that would be the PS3. And I'll reveal even more in a few minutes why the PS3 is not in there, because the PS2 is there, the PS4 is there, and I'm like, okay, one can play all this stuff and the other one can't play anything. It was just kind of an in-between sort of thing. And that generation, we'll talk more about that momentarily. So Phil, up to you.
All right. Well, I have to say this before I tell you this. This console that I'm going to tell you and the Xbox that I mentioned as my number 5.
Hyperscan.
Engage.
Okay. I had, at the time, I was more of a PC gamer than anything. And the reason why I played those consoles is because I would jump on them to play with my kids, right? When they were playing a game, I would like, hey, you want to play? You know, so I would play. And so that's why I have nostalgia for those particular consoles. But I did not include PC gaming in general because I don't consider
we're talking about consoles,
a video games console.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So having said that, Xbox is a console, but it is also a
It's a console, but it is a gaming. Console gaming now is veiled PC gaming.
Yeah. Okay. So having said that, my number 3 is the Super Nintendo. And the reason why the Super Nintendo is because that was one that I bought for the kids. And we played Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Justin loves sports games. So we had every Madden, which is horrible now, but back then we had a lot of fun with it. Ken Griffey baseball, all that. The Mario Kart came out on it.
The original, yep.
The Super Mario, we had a lot of fun with that. But there was also another game on there that I played called Plock. And I thought that was we just had a lot of fun with that game. I don't know what it was. And so anyway, I have nostalgia for that reasons, because I played it a lot with the kids, had a lot of fun. Is it the best console of all time? No. But is it in my top 5? Yeah. So
I would say the best controller of that era.
Certainly it introduced
the best 16-bit controller, in my opinion.
I didn't know how to act, because I was used to playing a 1-button 2600 or a 2-button master system, right? So when I had the 4 buttons and the shoulder buttons, I'm like, for a minute I got lost. It took me a minute to get acclimated, especially during Street Fighter, trying to do all the moves and stuff. So yeah, but yeah, definitely.
And the one thing about the Super Nintendo, spoiler alert, since Brian's been doing it the whole episode here, Super Nintendo's not on my list. I love the Super Nintendo, but it's not on my list.
Right.
Missed mine
but
much.
If you add all the Super Famicom games, which are completely compatible with your Super Nintendo, there is a lot of wild stuff there. Some like the Parodius series is one of my favorites. So it has a huge library, a currently very expensive library, but some awesome games on it for sure.
Well, I mean, for the longest time,
Yeah, I mean, Super Mario World was such a leap in bounds from like the previous one, because you had Super Mario, Super Mario 2, which obviously we know the story there, and then Super Mario 3, which was great. Well, and they were all three great, but there was just such a leap between Mario 3 and Super Mario World, that that just really sold that console, I think, right off the bat. And then with it, I mean, you had Square Enix and Enix, because they weren't Square Enix yet; they were SquareSoft and Enix separately.
Yep.
But they had so much good stuff there, and
So
I mean,
my favorite RPG of all time is Final Fantasy VI.
yeah,
And the next step up from Super Mario World, even though it's not a Mario game, the revolutionary Donkey Kong Country. I mean, what they
yes,
did with
yeah.
that.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I forgot
I mean,
about
just
that. Yeah,
Mhm.
we had that
Yeah.
too. It was
And
it was
Star
crazy.
Fox. I
It
mean,
was like
Star
3D.
Fox was
Star Fox. Yeah, we
amazing,
had
yeah.
that. Yeah.
So the fun thing, and because you've already said Genesis, I don't know if we're going to get any TurboGrafx 16s here. I don't
Nope.
have any nostalgia for it. But what Jeremiah Thomas is saying here, really, I mean, you could take those three systems and put them in any order, and I'd
Mhm.
understand it.
Mhm.
Right.
It was such an awesome
It
era
was.
for gaming.
And everything
So
was so different on those consoles, even though there was a little crossover on two, but so different on all three, all the way
they
across.
Right.
sounded different. Like the Genesis had its very unique sound.
Yeah.
Even the TurboGrafx had a very unique sound. Yeah. So
Yeah. And the
great
thing
pick.
I had the TurboGrafx, because again, I had a friend who had one during that era, and we had fun playing it. And obviously I have one now, and I very much enjoy it as well. So many shmups, especially when you look at the PC Engine library. That it just a good. I mean, and their version of Ninja Gaiden, top notch. And I mean, there's just so many good things. What was bad about the TurboGrafx 16 is it got announced a week after the Sega Genesis here in the United States. I mean, there was no competing at that point. Whenever Sega brought out that library of known arcade titles and everything else, and then you had Keith Courage, and then eventually Bonk. That
Yeah.
it didn't compete. But it is a good system. It's just it needed to come out years prior, like it did in Japan. They shouldn't have wasted over 2 years trying to make it look into the design they ultimately went with, which was still very questionable at the end of the day. I mean, if they would have kept it in the nice little PC Engine size, got it out 2 years earlier, I think we would have had a whole different outlook for the 16-bit era.
Yeah.
I could be wrong on that, but I do believe it would have been a whole different outlook there.
All right. So we're on to number 2 now, aren't we?
Yep.
Yeah.
So my number 2, it's a nostalgic pick, but also a pick based on one of my favorite homebrew communities, and it's the Atari 2600. Atari 2600 was by no means the first video game console, but it really started.
Kind of, sort of, yeah. Kind of, started the craze.
Certainly popularized it.
Yeah.
And the whole idea, it is one of 2 brand names that became just synonymous with gaming. And that, are you going to go play Atari? Have you played Atari today?
Mhm.
Or despite the fact that you may have had a Sega Genesis, your mom asked you, are you going to go play Nintendo
play
at
it.
Bobby's house?
Yep.
Mhm.
Right? So Atari 2600, it just so much nostalgia. The first 8-9 years of my life, it's all I played. Near the end of that, a couple friends had an NES that I would go over and play, or a Master System that I'd go over and play. But fantastic library. As I collect more and more, I love the fact that I'll find a game that I've never heard of, and it's actually pretty decent. Certainly simpler games, but then there's a whole community, a massive community doing some awesome stuff with it. You've got John Champeau, you've got Dion with Load Runner. I reviewed it.
Yeah, look at that Load Runner from this past week you did.
150
Oh my gosh.
levels. It was fantastic.
Right. I have it too.
And you've got like Daryl Spice Jr. You've got all these guys
Game
that
Select.
are making fantastic stuff. Game Select with Wizard in the Tower and Space Pac-Man. Yeah, just so there's the nostalgia, but also the fact that that homebrew community is just making it look better than it ever looked before.
Not to mention Audacity Games. They're doing new stuff.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Well, without a doubt. I mean, it's the homebrew community that's keeping that going. I mean, again, there's a lot of games that did not hold up well.
There's a reason for that.
But then there's a reason for that.
And the same reason there was a video game crash.
right. And but there's also a number of games that do hold up well. And again, just going back to an age of simplicity, you know, the fact that you just got an up, down, left, right, and one button. It just sometimes it's really nice to just lay back and play a game with that simplicity to it. So like I said, I probably should have maybe put mine up higher, but again, when I look at other things, if we were just retro only, it would have definitely been higher. But again, it's what started it, and it is amazing what the community has done to keep it strong. You know what? Almost 50 years later, so 40 or 45 years later. I mean, it's just. It's great, and then
that's like half of Phil's life.
And just and just seeing
don't laugh.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but again, I mean, if there wasn't an appeal, you wouldn't have a 2600 plus or a 7800 plus, and you wouldn't have games getting released or re-released, from them as well. I mean, it's just.
Jeremiah is like, what? You didn't read my code because you're talking about just sitting back with one button. He was playing Codebreaker with his daughter with keyboard controllers.
Yeah, I had nothing with that. when I played the Atari, it was literally just the one button joystick or the paddle.
Or the paddle. So, I think most people were like that.
Yeah.
Phil's number one video game console of all time, a stick. And if you rub it against another stick, it creates fire.
I actually had that console before I had my first video game console. I remember playing with sticks out in the street.
All right, Dr. Scott, what is your number two?
I didn't have my number two.
Yeah, let's do Brian's.
Oh, yeah, what is your number two?
Brian's. Oh, yeah, we were still on my number two.
He's gonna skip
He went on and on and on and on and on about your number two, but he didn't say a word about his.
You just talked so much about that
I know, right? No, again, this one's probably not a surprise, but as we're getting.
Go ahead, Brian. I'll wait.
Yeah, my number two. No, my number two was the NES. I mean,
rightly
again,
so.
going through growing up. Like I said, my very first console was playing the Intellivision 2. Barely had just had like 3 or 4 games for it, and then played my aunt's Atari, which then eventually I got it to be able to play it, and then finally I got my own NES. Like it was my own actual console, and just like I think many people at that time, it was the action set. So you got the 2 controllers, the Zapper, Duck Hunt, Mario, and the console, and again, it was amazing. I mean, you went from playing the Atari to that, and it was like, holy crap, like just graphically, sound wise, everything. It was such a leaps and bounds, and it was still a simplistic controller. That was the other side of it. And again, I have so many memories of just playing with friends, and that was the first console, at least that I can remember, that you were able to go to a video store and rent games for. So it was a very common practice to literally every weekend rent like 2 games and play them. And
you never rented Atari games? I did.
Yeah, I never had Atari games to rent. Yeah, no.
Okay.
So,
I remember seeing them. We never rented them, but I remember
you could buy them
at
cheaper than you could rent some of them bad boys at the end there.
But yeah, I have right. But I mean, I just have so many memories, and there were so many good games for it, and and they kept improving. Now again, being older, knowing the whole monopolistic practices, that that part sucks.
That part sucks, but it was also a direct response to
Correct.
the video game crash prior.
Right. I mean, I feel like they probably had to do it. Unfortunately, it stifled competition, but
You just
again,
say stifled
or stifled. I
Thank
went
you.
yes, but
He's got a cold. It's okay. It's okay.
yeah. But I mean, it's just I to me that's the number 2 because that's what so many of us played. You know,
Well,
when we were
and
kids
you know
during
what?
that era.
You and I are in that similar age bracket where
Yeah.
you know, a lot of people our age, the NES was probably their first console.
Mhm.
And yeah, so there's and you talk to anybody in their 40s and they are going to have a load of nostalgia for the NES.
And something to think about too that Mike mentioned with the Super Nintendo is the Nintendo had the Famicom games that were compatible if you could get them an adapter, but it's the same. It's the same system. It's the same system. It's just, but I don't think they sold adapters back in those days. But
you could
and
get
Famicoms
them.
weren't.
You'd get them at like the you go to like the Asian mall and there's that
Oh,
little
okay.
side shop with the adapter
I did
with
not
the
know
ribbon.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, no, I wasted so much time in Dragon Warrior, Jeremiah.
Dragon Warrior was awesome.
Yeah,
but don't think that Jeremiah is your friend because he said that we could skip you because you dumped the 2600 at number 5.
But no, I mean, again, Dragon Warriors, well, now Dragon Quest, you know, since they changed it back to its original name, is one of my favorite series. I mean, I literally own like every game from that. I mean, and again, it all started there. And I just remember playing that with a friend, staying up for very, very long hours of the night, just killing a whole bunch of slimes to save up enough money for that initial broadsword. So
yes, yeah. It's a slow build up, but then Dragon Warrior is a great game.
Yeah.
All right. Now, Scott.
Yeah.
Your number 2.
I'll zip right through this because my number 2 is also the Atari 2600.
Okay.
And, you know, mostly it was my first console. And everybody is talking about the NES. I didn't have one as a kid. My best friend 2 doors down, he had one. But I had a Commodore 64. So it was like I was going to his house to play that. He was coming to my house to play the Commodore. So I never needed an NES because I had the Atari and the Commodore at home. I had the best of everything right there. So I was like, I don't need an NES because he's got one. So, but the Atari, you know, with Asteroid Sequest, Demon Attack, you know, like some people have even mentioned Demon Attack, Frankenstein's Monster, Crackpots, Warlords, Gravatar, Mega Mania, one of the craziest, most random games you could possibly play on the system. Solar Storm, Yar's Revenge, Super Breakout, Haunted House. Such a simple game back then, and almost hard to play now, just because it's like, okay, that took 30 seconds. What's next? But such a nostalgic console for me, just because
we are talking about video games, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
But yeah, the 20s and the 7800. I almost mentioned that just because I could play the 2600 games on it, but I'm like, no, that's a separate library. It's a small library, and I don't have the same nostalgia for it. So
yeah,
since we whipped through the Atari 2600 so quickly, Phil, what do you have?
My number 2 is the Sega Master System. I love the Sega Master System. When I was a kid, coming up, every video game that I ever played, I had to play on a little 13-inch black and white TV because my dad told me that we couldn't put it on the family TV because back in those days we had 3 channels and no remote. and it's like, no, you're going to cause burn-in on my TV, so therefore you cannot play on it. Wherein in reality, I think he just wanted to watch the Rockford Files.
Well, but it was a common fear, which is why the Atari 2600 has a first screensaver.
Well, I had one of those, but that was irrelevant to him. So anyway, but the Master System, when I got married, I was at a JCPenney, and there was a skid of them right out in the middle of the aisle, and I think they were like $69.
Johnny, Phil's just happy he had a television.
Yeah,
a color
exactly. I didn't get cable. We had cable. Cable didn't. It wasn't even a thing until I was in high school. That's all.
Sorry, I distracted him. Go ahead. You were in JC
That's
Penney.
okay. So anyway, so I picked $69. Why not? So I picked one up and I went to a local KB's toy and picked up a few games. And then I'm like, and I got to play on a color TV. I was so happy. I'm like, yes. And the graphically compared to what I had been used to, it was superior. And I thought, you know what? So I ended up, I think at my original library, I think I had maybe 10, 12 games, something like that. And Zillion 2, the Alex Kidd series. I had Outrun, Afterburner, Hang On, Time Soldiers. It just, I enjoyed those games back then, so much so that when I got it back into retro gaming, that it is my second favorite console, not only to play on, but to collect for. And I'm up to, of course, this is a mixture of US titles and European or non-US titles. I'm at about 120 games now.
Oh, wow.
Which is not a bad.
That's a
bad,
good library.
No, you're higher than I am. I was gonna say I think I'm sitting around 65 between PAL and NTSC versions. So
yeah, and that's another thing too. The couple things. A PAL game will play on the US console. And the console, we talked about the NES, but when you look at the specs of the console itself, the Master System is actually a superior console to the NES in that regard.
Yeah.
The problem with it, they didn't have the licensing for a lot of the games, and so their library was very limited, and that's why they didn't really do very well.
As Jeremiah points out, it was limited, but it was solid. It had
Fantasy Star, R-Type. Yeah, I mean, and they're all great. It's my second favorite, even now. I just love playing on my Sega Master System and playing Master System games. So that's my number 2.
The only Master System game that I still have, and I have it in a tote right here, right by the side of my desk, or right under my desk. That's the only one I have left.
Yep.
And I had a few. I had a few, but that's the only one I have left. So it's just part of my Ghostbusters collection. That's all. Not the best version of that game, that's for sure.
Yeah.
In my opinion, the best version is on the Commodore. Actually, that's the best one.
Well, and honestly, like someone mentioned Rampage. My opinion is that was the best home port of Rampage.
Oh yeah,
during that era of time.
Yeah,
because obviously we've had arcade perfect ports now, but it's just but during that era, that is by far the best version of Rampage.
And
of course, Post
Mr. Poststyle is here for you. All these consoles are infinitely better with a new controller from BD Retro
Mods.
Get your order in today.
Yeah.
Shameless plug, except that Brian's not doing it this week.
All right, so let's bring it home. My number 1 is an incredibly nostalgic one, and it will probably be no surprise based on how I was responding to Brian's number 2. It's the NES. I went directly from the Atari 2600 to the NES. It was such a massive leap. The game library, especially when I came into it, like end of '89, like the Genesis was coming out. We got the NES. We got the set with the power pad, which I think was like the power set or something like that.
Yeah.
And so we had World Class Track Meet, we had Duck Hunt, we had Super Mario Brothers. All of those were great. But then Super Mario Brothers 3, one of my favorite games of all time. All the Mega Man games. And that was the era where we would go and rent games all the time. For me, we didn't do that with the 2600. We didn't do that with the Super Nintendo. Like, we didn't really rent games, except for in that NES era. And it is just, man, so much nostalgia sitting there playing. You learned so many different swear words throwing that controller against the wall because some game was unfair. Like Contra, Metroid,
Kid
Legend of
Icarus. You
Zelda,
want
Kid
frustration.
Icarus, just all these great things. And I think Jeremy Thomas might think something's missing. My top 5 was Intellivision, PS1, original Xbox 2600, and NES. But yeah, I'm not going to go too much more into it because we've gone over and we've already talked a lot about the NES. But that is my number one, and it is
solid pick.
A huge part of that is the nostalgia pick.
Solid pick. All right, Brian. Yeah.
So I mean, I think this one's gonna come as a shock. So, but again, just you got to hear me out on it. It's just
Hyperscan.
No.
Wonder Swan.
So no, to me, the number one. And again, I went back and forth on.
Wait, let me get my finger on the button so I can hang up. Hold on.
Yeah, right. No, and there's reasons for this. It's just I feel like the number one, because again, we weren't talking about just retro.
Yeah,
is the Nintendo Switch. And
I respect that choice.
And I thought about that a little bit, and really, it just comes down to like, again, Nintendo finally took a risk. They knew. I mean, Nintendo, and not that Nintendo, I think, ever tried since the GameCube on, but like they knew, like, we can't compete with the latest.
You are
Xbox,
dead to Jeremiah. I hope
or the latest PlayStation. So they went their own route. I mean, they took a risk and quote unquote cannibalized one of their markets to bring this out, because again, the handheld market was where it was at for Nintendo. Because again, everyone, like, we all like their consoles, but in the sense of numbers sold, the handheld market was their bread and butter that kept them going. So when they took a risk and said, let's combine the markets, and we got the Nintendo Switch way back in 2017, because again, it's long at the teeth now. We should have had probably a new one a lot sooner than what we're going to have. And again, we've had an episode about the Switch too, where I really question it because of the fact of now that you have the portable PC machines like a Steam Deck and things like that now.
Is there even a point?
But when you look at what's been available for the Switch since it's come out, I mean, it's unique design.
The library is massive.
It's a massive library. There's literally games there for everybody. So if you want to reminisce on, I mean, I say this jokingly, but you want to reminisce on the old days of Wii bowling, there's a game for that. If you want to have your top-notch Mario games, there's a game for that.
And
if you want
generations back, and not just Nintendo games, you're talking like BioShock and
right,
the Wii and the Wii U that you can get on cartridge too. Rehashed or redone or remastered or what? I mean, oh man, Brian, this is a great can of worms. I'm glad you brought it in.
Yeah, and it's just, and like with the homebrew, like the indie scene, not the homebrew scene. The indie scene, like so many indie games have been made available on the console. I mean, that you don't normally.
I used to love, and this was earlier when the Switch came out. So many of these smaller indie games would get physical releases for like $20.
Right.
I picked like all of those up, like Tiny Barbarian, Cave Story, like great little games, and I love to having physical copies of them.
Yeah. And again, kind of to Phil's point on some of the stuff, it's also because it was kind of I mean, obviously I played other consoles with him, but that was probably the first console for my son, so again, just being able to play those games with him and do different things with that. I mean, that's another piece to it. And it's just, I just think when it comes to the Nintendo Switch, it's priced right. Again, it's long at the teeth now. I would not buy one at this point in time. I'd wait for a Switch 2 if you really wanted to go down that rabbit hole. But I mean, it was priced right, and it literally has content for everybody. And that's hard to say, because sometimes a lot of these consoles were catered to a certain group of people. And I think this is, not saying this is the only one, but this is one that really did well at getting to the masses of everybody. There's something there for everyone to play.
All right.
Scott,
Number
don't disappoint us. Jeremiah's already mad at one of us.
number one.
I will not, because this is actually retro. It is probably the newest of the retro because of its age, or lack thereof. But there's also a reason why I didn't pick the PS3, because of the Xbox 360. That's my number one. And not only can you play 60% of the original Xbox library, the Xbox 360 library itself is massive, which of course crosses over a lot of third-party games that are on both PS3, on the Wii, but of course almost all of those are done better on the 360 and the PS3. But there are a lot of games that are done better on the 360 anyway, simply and one of my absolute favorites of all time, the Rainbow Six Vegas, and especially Vegas 2, just because of that controller, man. I love that controller. Phil, you hit it spot on, but for me, the sweet spot is the 360 controller. I didn't care for the Duke when they came out with the S on the original. I was like, yes, this is better. And then they improved that. And that is I think is one of the best controllers ever made, the 360, especially since you don't have rechargeable batteries. I hate rechargeable batteries. Oh crap, this is dead. Well, now what am I going to do? I mean, if I want to buy rechargeables and pop two in there real quick and have two on, have two charging, I can do that. Or if I just want to buy a whole bunch of batteries and pop two in, I can. But the exclusives, that's the reason why I chose the 360 mostly. For me, it was all about Halo 3, Halo 4, Halo Reach. Of course, Rainbow Six Vegas 2 and Halo 3 is what sold the system to me. And then when I saw Gears of War, holy smokes, I was just like, all right, I got to buy one of these. And
the 360 blew me away when I first saw it. I agree. And Jeremiah Thomas does have a good point, especially about first generation, both the 360 and PS3. Yellow Light, I had more friends with PlayStations that had to exchange theirs for warranty because of the disk drive or the yellow light of death. It was a bad era for cooling down.
Once they got to that slim, it was fine.
Once they got to the slim, it was fine. Dead Rising was also a great game. I love that game.
Left 4 Dead 1 and 2. If you like shooters and shmups, and I always pronounce this wrong.
A lot.
Automius, excellent. Love that game. Prey is a really great one. Project Gotham 3 and 4, Splinter Cell Conviction, even though it's on the PS3, the best of the Splinter Cell games. Absolutely. Time Shift, Singularity, what an amazing game. Chrome Hounds, Hydro Thunder Hurricane from the XBLA. If you like Hydro Thunder, and Skyrim on there, that was, that's where it was born, and that generation, and that's the 360's my top pick. And I was surprised that my wife didn't say Atari 2600 for me. She goes, no, it's the 360. She goes, that's the one we always play. That's where we always go. So
your wife picked your list for you? That checks.
No, she guessed. I just said,
he was in there eating the pretzels.
Yeah. Will you write this list for me, hon? These are great.
And at the end of it, that's a great number one, because that was the peak of the Xbox.
Absolutely.
I would agree.
Whenever you look at, just like with my own buying stuff, like, again, I did a lot of PS1, did a lot of PS2, and but then whenever I got to the Xbox 360, most of my collection was Xbox 360 and not PlayStation 3. And again, to your point, it was because I agree. I think that's one of the best controllers they made was on the 360, and I think that was part of the reason that I enjoyed playing it. You had the Xbox Live Arcade, that just had a lot of really good stuff on it.
A lot of good stuff.
I know Jeremiah won't approve, but Metal Gear 3 Snake Eater. That's my favorite Metal Gear game.
It's just, that was the peak of Microsoft with the Xbox. It's a shame they've not been able to come back from that. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, that was the peak level, and they just have not been able to get back up there since. So,
yeah. All right, Phil, bring us home.
I'm bringing you home. You guys are it's not going to be any surprise to anybody, but my favorite number one all-time console is the Coleco electronic quarterback.
That's wow. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. No. I'm kidding.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Yeah, good night. Thing works too. That was actually my very first gaming system. If you considered handhelds a gaming console gaming system, yeah, that was the very first experience to video gaming I ever had. But my number one video game console of all time is the Atari 2600.
Never would have seen that coming.
If you guys, we're actually closing in. I should have a lot more subscribers than I do because of it, but I'm closing in on almost 1,000 videos made.
Wow.
In 3+ years. Okay, because I stream a lot. I live stream a lot, and that includes those.
The Coleco Telestar, yeah.
Yeah. But I had it before it came out in 1977, and Atari was, man, they were having airtime for TV commercials like crazy. And I was like, Mom, Dad, please, I want one. But my dad was blue collar. My mom did not work, but they had a Sears credit card, and they were $199 back in 1977. But that is like $900 plus today. And I can remember getting the thing, and they had wrapped it up for Christmas, and I just opened it up, the little paper up just a little bit, just to make sure that oh yes, we got one. But we got the Sears version, so I thought we were getting ripped off, especially when it had Air Sea Battle. But it's like, Air Sea Battle, man, that was actually in some respects better than Combat, in my opinion.
Oh yeah,
but
absolutely.
Well,
anyway,
Combat, you had to have two people. You couldn't do anything with Combat.
Yeah. So, but even then, for a number of years, I kick him off of here. Why are you even doing?
No, it's not dirty. I can bring it up.
Yeah, but that's so degrading. It wasn't. It was a Sears catalog. Anyway,
is this what you had, Phil?
I had the telegames. Yep, that's exactly what I had right there, baby. Yeah. But until Space Invaders came, their library was okay, but it was still fun to play, because I was 12. My whole entire life, I did not know what a video game was. I had never played a video game at home. We were told to go outside, not to come until the street lights came on. That's the way it was back when I came up, right? And so it's like, oh man, I can do this at home, even if it was on a little 13-inch black and white. Yeah. But then when Space Invaders was the killer app for the 2600, it took off, and then all of a sudden the ports, Missile Command, Asteroids, Defender. Donkey Kong, all of these. And I'd say I'd mentioned 1,000 episodes, because I think half of them are on the 2600. Half of them are. I know, but I play a lot of homebrews now, so that a lot of it's newer stuff, but I play older stuff too sometimes. And I know that it's not, graphically it's not superior, but I like the gameplay. I have the most nostalgia for it. And
you know what? Because and what I think a big part of that is, when you first got that Atari 2600, that's like when Brian and I were getting into the NES and even like the Genesis Super Nintendo.
That was,
like, there is a sweet spot of nostalgia. Yeah, being old enough to be able to play all the games and understand them, but young enough to have the time to play them.
Right. But when I got into high school, I want to also have to say this. I wanted to include Intellivision in this list. I wanted to include ColecoVision in this list. I really did. Those two, I'm like, oh man, I really want to include those so bad. But I'm creating nostalgia for them now. I'm creating nostalgia because I'm having a lot of fun playing them now. But I have zero, other than George Plimpton being on TV, comparing the two, but
Oh, the
um,
Intellivision.
and
As
so
you can see, clearly the Intellivision is superior.
but I lived through the video game crash. So like everybody and
Those
their
were dark
grandmother
days.
was
It's like the
getting
Great Depression.
it was a Great Depression of video games. It really was. And there
You got some
there
really
was
good deals during
Not
that
really,
time,
not
though.
really to the consumer. It was a boom for
well,
the
not
consumer
to the
because everything
well, it
was
was
cheap.
because even though I remember buying video games for $1, but
Yep.
when you get them home, it's like it's not even worth that.
Yeah.
You
Bugs.
know, and I got to the point, honestly, I got to the point as I got into high school, and my brother, he wouldn't play anymore because I kept beating him real bad in the 2-player game. So he wouldn't play me anymore, and he wasn't really into it like I was. So I got my 800 XL, and I said, you know what? I'm done with the 2600. And I packed the thing up and I gave it to a poor family in the church, to some kids who didn't have anything. So they had something, you know, and they had a lot of games because I had a lot of games. I gave them all. I said, you know what, here it is. But
Phil
is my
talks about
favorite.
the early 80s gaming as if he was in NAM.
Dude, my 800 XL had an 8 baud modem, 8 baud, not 56K, 8 baud modem. That, and I could only connect to bulletin boards. There was no internet. So,
Your
I'm
first
old.
video game was Stick.
Yeah, it was. But well, this was really my first, but
Stick.
yeah. So
There you go.
anyway. All right, man. I had a lot of fun tonight.
I like this one.
This was a good show, man. You guys all had your own list, yeah, and with your own memories and your own reasons.
There's some
to
good
have
lists
those.
in the comments too.
Yeah, and everybody who watched, they have their favorites. And so did we mention your favorites, guys? If so, let us know in the comments of the video, you know, what you think. And I had a bunch of fun. Dr. Scott, if you guys are not familiar with Game Closet, check out Game Closet. Hit a sub over there, and obviously he'll be back. He's been on our show a number of times, and we love Scott a
And
bunch.
thanks for having me. And,
yeah,
and if you love Atari 2600, that
Jeremiah just ranked our lists.
Nice.
if you do love the Atari 2600, I do have, of course, a lot of playlists over on my channel. There is a dedicated Atari 2600 playlist, and some of the videos over there, as you guys, you know, especially the guys here on the dais, shall we say, know that a lot of my stuff is very skit based, and a couple of the videos, like the hero one that came out in November, I put a lot of love, sweat, and tears into that one, and it starts off with a very cinematic sort of intro that goes on for about
/
3 minutes.
music video.
Yeah, and then we go into the review, and I guarantee you, by the very, very end of that, you're going to be You're just going to be laughing your butt off. I guarantee it. So, but thanks for having me on, and this was a really fun episode. They always are. It's always good to hang out with you guys.
Yeah. So, well, guys, I appreciate all of you guys being on here, and I appreciate all of you out there who watched tonight. So with that, I think we are going to sign off.
Thanks,
we've been on for an hour and a half, but it doesn't seem like that at all because we've just had too much fun. So y'all have an awesome day. We'll see you next time on Retro Bliss Rewind.
See ya.